What's up, guys? Welcome into Football and Random Things. I'm Connor Ferguson here with Jeff Woody and Colin Newell here in the Wild Rose Casino in Jefferson. We're not in Jefferson, but I'm just reading off a computer, and I'm still not very good at it. So this is the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network, fueled by Cody Road. We are once again presented today by Wiffles Hybrids. Really appreciate them hopping on to get to do this every week. Sorry I missed last week, but we're all back and we're ready to talk some Cyhawk.
It's a learning opportunity. It's the best podcast that we've done against Iowa.
There we go.
That's a meta joke from Campbell's postgame comments. Glad that landed. Thanks, everybody. I'm here all week.
Man, that got some fans riled up on Saturday night.
Just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to dissect that, and we'll actually get into football a little bit here, but I think a big part of that is Matt Campbell's using quote unquote the media. I hate using that term, but using that avenue to relay to his team that he is proud of how that young team played, at least in that game, for how tough that game is, despite the loss, obviously.
I think that there's a couple plays in that game that obviously made a difference in the outcome of the game, but I thought overall they did play halfway decent, pretty good there.
Yeah, my assessment is pretty much how I expected it to go. Defense honestly played better than I thought they would, because I did going in thinking like McNamara can sling it a little bit, and the fact that I think he had 12 completions in the entire game. Iowa had 9 first downs in the entire game. Like, defense played better than I expected. Rocco actually held his own really well. I thought the offensive line and tight ends were very hit or miss throughout the day, but they also have a really tough matchup. Just the way that Iowa plays, it's tough. So I don't know. I'm not disappointed with how they played. It just sucks losing to Iowa because there's no surprise. It's like you walk into a room, when you go into that room, there's going to be a guy who says, "I'm going to punch you in the face now." And you know that the guy's going to punch you in the face, and yet you still get punched in the face. Like, knowing full well that when you walk into the room, you're going to get punched in the face, and you just still do. Like, that's the frustrating part, is knowing that it happens again and again. That's, I think, where the frustration comes from. But if you get rid of that, thinking just playing Iowa State against an opponent and that opponent being good, not that bad of a game, all things considered.
Yeah, I think about Iowa, and we saw it once again, is they don't make mistakes. They're in their gaps. They're gap sound. They don't let the big play happen. And that's exactly what we saw this week. And I think that there's some great things that we took away from that. We were able to move the ball a little bit, and defense was just played outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, some plays you can point to where, and I don't want to just list off the mistake plays and name the players. But those guys and the people know who they are, took credit for saying, like, I made that mistake. Rocco back said it's an overtime game if I don't throw that interception. So there's certain things where, if you would have prevented the big play, that's what Iowa did the entire game. And somehow, some way, they play about as close to mistake-free football as it gets.
Well, the entire defensive scheme is predicated on the fact that I don't think that you can drive 13 plays without screwing up. That's the whole thing. Like, that's their whole scheme. It's why, so they're most of the time going to play cover 4. Every once in a while play cover 3 or cover 2. Very rarely are they going to play anything other than those deep shell coverages. They also instruct their safeties, like, because they trust their defensive line to hold the offensive line and tight ends enough that their linebackers are going to be making most of the tackles, whether it's the guy playing in space who's sort of like a nickel hybrid. I think that was Castro. Well, they would just bop back and forth. It's 10 or 39 were the ones that did it, and 34 is the middle linebacker. Those guys are going to make most of the tackles, so they trust the safeties don't have to be involved. So what are they going to do with the safeties? Play over the top of everything. That's why most of the time, like, not to bring up something that's uncomfortable, is the year that you guys played them and Brock threw, I think, 3 or 4 picks. The reason why those interceptions happen is because they're playing a general zone coverage. They're having their safeties play way over the top most of the time. And if you throw something underneath that isn't dead precise and that ball gets tipped, because they're playing over the top, they're going to be able to get that interception. So those tip interceptions are meant to be there. And then a lot of people have been wondering, like, why don't you take shots against this defense? you kind of can't. Like, the whole point of this defense is to not allow those things to happen. So until you have Chris Olave, you're probably not going to. Like, and CJ Stroud to chuck it down the field against Chris Olave. Like, you're probably not going to have that happen. So to beat Iowa, you have to do what they did on the first and last drives of the game, which is 7 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 12 yards, 4 yards, 12 yards, 6 yards, 11, whatever. You have to just do that down the field, because the entire defensive scheme that they execute and do it really well is designed to not let you take those big shots.
I'm glad you brought that up and phrased it like that, because one of my biggest takeaways walking out of that game was that they would chunk their play up the field and get into about the 30-yard line or so on first or second down. They either have a run go for a loss of yardage, or they try to throw a ball, 15-yard route, and it gets dropped. And after that, any of those plays, it was a drive killer.
Yeah,
the entire game.
It's because you get behind the chains and it's hard.
Getting behind the chains against that defense, especially, they can pass rush. I mean, that offensive line, another week with no sacks and limited QB hits and stuff like that. So it's cool to see that offensive line take that. I think Aiden said 1 of 7 teams in the country. Is that right?
10?
1 of 7 or so teams in the country that hasn't given up a sack this year. So that's obviously a welcome sight, and a lot of credit goes to that offensive line and those running backs and tight ends for getting that cleaned up there.
I didn't want to ask you guys, because I walked in, you both were, obviously, I'm the last one here every week. That's
Absolutely.
how it goes.
Yep.
You guys were breaking down the run game. Why was the run not as successful as it should have been throughout the day?
Okay, so we have to go back to the understanding what Iowa does and why they are so good. So a couple things. The way Iowa runs their defense when they play that really high shell, so it's cover 4 or cover 2 or cover 3, they're playing deep safeties, but they're going to leave everything underneath. And we talked about last week with Iowa playing a 2-gap style on the defensive line, which is, if you have a really solid defensive line that can play 2-gap, that means most of the time double teams aren't going to be able to get up to the linebackers, which means the linebackers can more or less run free, which is why running up the middle, usually against Iowa, doesn't work, is because you have defensive linemen that are standing their ground against a guard, and let's say Colin then comes to help the guard on move this defensive lineman, but there's not enough movement because Iowa's defensive line is playing it dead square. They're holding that guard's line, or maybe even getting a little bit of a pushback. So you as the center have to help him longer. You can't get up to the linebacker. And by the time you would get up to the linebacker, that guy's already made a scrape or gotten down to where the running back is. And it's just a mass. There's just a pile in the middle. So the linebackers can play free, and the defensive line is going to play a 2-gap. Second thing about this is that Iowa State at this point against Iowa has shown tendencies that Iowa knows. And so, like, if you're wherever the tight ends are, there are sometimes keys to where you need to where Iowa would put an extra defender. And so that extra defender, whether it's on a run blitz or whether that's going to be putting him outside the tight end and caving in the tight end, meaning he's lined up on the tight end's outside shoulder, and his job, instead of the tight end needs to move him out, his entire job, he's not trying to make a tackle because he knows that the linebackers behind him are going to make the tackle. His entire job is to take that tight end and throw him into the guard's legs, of just push everything in. And then Cooper DeJean, or whenever one of their corners or outside scrape players, is going to play underneath. So defensive line does a really good job with 2-gap. Linebackers do a really good job scraping. And Iowa has shown an understanding of where Iowa State's tendencies are to where to put the extra player. All that being said, they executed okay, but they got themselves in too many situations where it is obvious whether it is going to be a run or a pass. So it's really hard to run the ball when most of your third downs are 3rd and 8 or wherever, whether that's a 7-yard run on first down and then a 3-yard loss on second down, and now you're 3rd and 7, no run threat at all.
Yeah, I think just efficiency on offense and defense too against that team is so critical. When you get behind the sticks, kind of like what he talked about, your playbook goes from 100 plays to 25 plays. And
Iowa probably knows what those 25 plays are.
Yeah, and those numbers obviously aren't accurate, but just saying like, hey, you limit yourself on what you can do, and that makes everyone's job a little bit harder, because when someone knows what you're going to do, you can't have that sneak attack or anything like that. So I think just the fact that some of those plays early downs weren't as efficient as possible really created some situations where Iowa's defense then has a leg up. But I thought that there was overall offensively some growth there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you think about is like, if this is the strongest test that you're going to encounter defensive, this will be the best defensive line
Yes.
that Iowa State plays all
Defense.
season. Best defense generally, except maybe Texas as far as talent is concerned. But this is going to be the best test that Iowa State has all year, and they held up okay. Like the problem is when I was mentioning that Iowa State or Iowa's entire defense is just predicated on not screwing up and making you drive all the way down the field. Here are just the not yards. This is just the number of plays in a drive, and just listening to how different the numbers are. So 15-play drive, 4-play drive, 5, then 3 and out, 3 and out, 2-play interception, 11 plays, 6 plays, 3 plays, 8 plays, 14. So it's not like they're all 3 and outs, and it's not like they're all 15-play drives. But at some point, you go from on the longer drives, 1st and 10, 2nd and 2, take a shot, convert on 3rd down. Or 1st and 10, 2nd and 2, 1st down. You move the ball. But at some point in that drive, if you get 1st and 10, 2nd and 13, whether that's a QB hit, whether that's you miss a block, whether that's they send a blitz that you don't pick it up, whatever, and you get behind the sticks, are you going to run the ball in 2nd and 13?
Makes it tough.
Makes it tough. You're probably not. So now you have to get into a throwing situation, or you're going to run like something as like a draw-ish because you can maybe get a little bit of yards somewhat. But because you're in these behind the stick situations, that's why Iowa, it is the most annoying, boring ass defense to play against. But if you get behind the sticks, it limits your offense substantially, even on 2nd down. And so if there's one negative play in a drive, then you have to make a Herculean pass or Herculean play to get back ahead of the sticks, to get back in rhythm. So like that's the problem that was happening, is you were right on 7 plays. And there were some good runs. Like Sama had a couple good runs. Norton had a couple good runs.
Yep.
It's not like they didn't move the ball. It's just that every once in a while you have a negative play. And on that negative play against Iowa, it's not 2nd and 12. All right, let's get 6 back on this one. Let's get another 6 in the next play. It's like, shit, if we don't get 8 on this, then there's no chance we can convert on 4th down. So you start pressing. It's just everything gets out of whack when you get behind the sticks, and all it takes is one missed block somewhere to have that happen.
And like you guys said, you obviously have, this playbook where there's tells for at least for Iowa's defense against Iowa State. And how much does that get shrunk when this was the first game Rocco Beck played against a Power 5 defense?
I felt like Rocco had good control out there. I don't feel like there was anything, from what I could tell, that they were like, oh, we don't like this play. Obviously, the one miscue there. But other than that, I felt like he played a pretty solid game. He commanded the offense pretty well. That's a great defense that they went out and played against, and threw a touchdown, great. And then, he played well. He had that big ball to Higgins, and I think he did exactly what you have to against that Iowa defense to take away that one mistake there. And I think he did a great job of being able to see the field. It is the dump down passes, kind of like what he said. You're not probably going to go and throw the ball down the field a ton against Iowa, and take what the opponent gives you.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is that like it didn't help this isn't in any way an excuse. The way the game was officiated leans towards Iowa, because one of the things that you can do against Iowa when given the chance, which is why Iowa State with Xavier Hutchinson last year was able to do it. Riley Moss is playing in the NFL for a reason. He's a damn good corner. But if you're able to, if you're going to call the physicality that Iowa has as holding or as pass interference, if that's the way the game's going to be officiated, it allows you to then take chances, because Iowa will put their secondary in positions where one-on-ones they say, hey, Cooper, you're going to have to win this one-on-one against this tight end, or you're going to have to win this one-on-one against a wide receiver or whatever. But if they're letting the defensive backs, which Iowa State got away with it too, like the pick by Jeremiah Cooper probably was a DPI in most other games, but it wasn't. So that's the way they're letting him play. So like if the way the game was officiated, on that first drive, the one that ended up in the blocked field goal, Jaden Higgins was in the end zone, and the corner was like grabbing his arm. They didn't call it, but then they didn't turn around and call it the other way. But if they're going to allow Iowa to be that physical down the field, where do the opportunities come from? You want to run down the field. You want to take a big shot somewhere. And like I was listening to Sage Rosenfels on the CW or the podcast with Chris Williams talking about quarters beaters. Like they exist. And Iowa State's offensive line has done a decent enough job at protecting Rocco to give him enough time to throw it down the field were they to do that. And a quarters beater is you just have to grab the eyes of one of the middle safeties and then you can throw a post behind him because you're presumably going to be in a better position on the corner as long as the safety's out of the way. So cover 4. Just take if you put 4 fingers out, take one of the 2 middle fingers and put it down, and you're trying to throw it to the one just on the outside of that. So you can throw a post to that route. But if they're going to allow you to be physical and grab and hold, like we saw there was another one, there was a wheel route they tried to throw to Bramer. So there's a wheel route they tried to throw to Bramer. DeJean's got the back of his jersey, but they're allowing that. And so if you're trying to run this big post and trying to catch the eyes of the safety underneath, but that corner's allowed to mug the receiver all the way down the field, where does the opportunity come from? So the way the game was officiated, plus the way that Iowa plays defense, plus the situations that getting behind the sticks once or twice happens, that's why you can't take shots down the field. It's because the whole game was set up for that. Now, that benefited Iowa State on the other side because there were times when the PBU that Jeremiah Cooper had in the end zone on Lachey, he kind of grabbed his left hand. Cooper's left hand was on Lachey's back and kind of like got his right hand up out in front of it. So that if you're calling it ticky-tack, if you're calling it a little bit tighter, that's probably a defensive pass interference. But they let it go both ways. So that style prevented Iowa State from being able to take shots down the field and the way that Iowa's defense plays.
I think that benefits us too. I mean, our safeties are big, strong, physical dudes that come into the box and they can tackle. I mean,
for sure.
Between Jeremiah Cooper and Bo Freiler, they both had great games and were in there making 16 tackles plus combined. And when you can go in there and you can allow those two to be physical in the back end with Malik and then TJ and Miles as well, I think there's just great opportunities for us to kind of show what that back half of that defense can do.
Well, and if you're talking about the safeties too, I'm Team Malik Verdun fan club, but he was basically matched up with Lachey or All the entire game.
Yeah,
like
big body.
And so Luke Lachey's 6'7". So if you're going to be trying to guard against 6'7" in obvious passing downs, you're going to put 6'4" Malik Verdun on him. Lachey had 3 catches. One of those was on a play action down the field, just I think 35 yarder. So like you take away that 35-yard catch, he had 2 catches for 23 yards. He's potentially the best tight end in the country. And he had 2 catches for 23 yards because Malik Verdun was following him around the entire time.
Lockdown.
And so you're playing really well on defense. And so it benefits Iowa State on defense when you're able to play that physical against a team like that, but it also hurts your offense. So like that's why one of the reasons why the game ended up playing in the style that it did is because the refs were letting it be a UFC fight, which lends itself to both defenses and hurts both offenses.
I kind of know how you watch games at this point, but I do need to hear what you thought about the pass interference Iowa State was called on the play Iowa scored on. Not play, drive Iowa scored. I think they scored a touchdown off that play.
It was a field goal.
Touchdown. That was a field goal one.
I think it was a right call because he was,
and I agree with that. I wasn't bringing it up to hear you bitch about it.
He did hit him. He hit him early, but on the other side, I think there is a tendency towards like if you're going to call a pass interference there are other pass interferences that you probably can call, and I think that was probably once they called that one and they recognized that they didn't call the one on Higgins when Lee was kind of grabbing him by the arm.
All over him.
I think that's the reason why the rest of the game they basically didn't call anything, is because they realized like it was slightly inconsistent application of the rule early. So are we going to let it play, or are we going to play it? Are we going to call it really tight? Like what are we going to do? And I think they made the decision to let it play a little bit more, which again benefited Iowa State's defense down the road. But I think one other thing just generally, like, and I wish officials did this more, but I would say block charge in basketball, pass interference in football, got to be the 2 hardest things to call because there's always hand fighting. There's always contact in basket.
You could always call something at some point.
Right.
At what point do you let the guys play?
Yeah. And one thing I wish, though, is that technically speaking, when the ball goes up in the air, the defensive guy has just as much of a right to it as the offensive guy. And so on that Cooper interception, the reason why I think they allowed it is because Cooper was in a better receiving position than Ragaini. Like he was camped underneath like a punt return. And I think if you were to, yes, his hands were on Ragaini, but Ragaini's hands were also on him. So it's one of those things that like I wish they called more OPIs in those situations as opposed to just saying there was contact, defense's fault. But I don't think it was a poorly officiated game. It was just more, all right, let them both play. Hey, stay off each other's face masks and don't hit anybody late. Go for it.
Yep.
You're definitely onto something there because, like, when I was watching you play in college, there was OPI was almost unheard of.
Right. Which I wish they just did it more. Like, they would call OPIs on, like, when you'd run a pick play, like an obvious pick play in like the receiver's chest, like you block a linebacker down the field. But other than that, it would very rarely get called. I wish they did more of that to give the defenses more of a shot to, especially to be underneath the play. Like, if you're, Jeremiah Cooper and you're going to make an interception and the receiver like grabs you by the arm, that should be an OPI. But a lot of times they won't call that because it's a defensive guy. But that is diatribe that doesn't need to get. That's a wormhole we don't necessarily need to travel down.
Absolutely. And once again, we are presented here on Football and Random Things by Wiffles Hybrid. Fine, wonderful people over there.
Independent.
Chris knows all of them. Independent, absolutely. Why don't you do the ad?
Wiffles. I love the radio reads. So I was calling Drake. So I had to watch the first half on TV, and that
The first half of the
Cyhawk game on TV, and then got in the car and listened to John and Eric call like the third quarter ish as I was going to Drake Stadium, and the Wiffles commercial guy, A+. If you haven't heard the Wiffles commercial guy, it's unbelievable. I mean, the voice actor just sounds like he belongs in a TV Western with like a giant bucket hat and a huge mustache. I don't know who it is, but I want that guy to have a mustache.
We'll have you imitate him in 10 minutes here.
Wiffles, plant your independence. A lot of P's.
You got it down.
A lot of P's, a lot of C's.
I'm off the hook on all these now. Well, I didn't get a script or anything. I don't know like the words to say. I just have to say presented by Wiffles Hybrid.
Yeah.
And
Hey, you got
I'm
it
also
down.
supposed to give your insurance company and stuff. What do you do?
Yeah, I work for Farm Bureau.
Cocktail party?
I didn't even know that was in here. So yeah, I do.
Well, I figure
insurance
you're
for
on the
Farm
show
Bureau.
and we'll give it to you.
Yeah, so I do insurance for Farm Bureau Financial Services. We do home, auto, life, health. We do it all. And if you ever have any insurance needs in this crazy market right now, give me a call. You can find my number online.
You can say your number if you want to.
515-635-1059.
There we go. He saved Brent Bloom $500 famously.
I did.
So, from your standpoint on the Cyhawk game, how was the offensive line? Did they make a jump from week 1 to week 2? And overall, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there was some stuff that they did really well. I think we had some great play in certain situations. I think that there's certain situations though that just kind of like the whole offense and this whole team, we're gonna see growth. That's a really, really worthy defense that we went up against, and I think that the fact that we were able to keep them off the quarterback and we're able to continue this sack-free football, I think that gives you a huge advantage. Woody kind of talked early on about falling behind the sticks, and in critical situations, that really does matter. Whether that can knock you out of field goal range or it can lead to big plays. You take a shot on first down, and then all of a sudden you're at first and 20 instead of first and 10. If you throw the ball away, I think situational football is a huge way to win football. And that offensive line did a great job of saying, "Hey, we're going to make sure that we take care of our quarterback and be in situations to do that." Run game, that's a really worthy defense. I think we're going to be able to see some continued growth there as well. But I think the tackles played well. I think James Neal had a great game. And I think that we're just going to continue to see those guys continue to lead. I think you can tell that they're all kind of grinders out there. So they're not going to be guys that lay down. It's fourth quarter. We're still driving the football.
Jeffrey, special teams.
Other than the blocked kick, which was a weird situation because they were set up, and then I think what happened is the snapper moved the ball forward like 2 feet, and so
Which is usually like pretty allowed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, to a point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that he just moved it further than the official wanted or picked it up. So like one of the things you can talk about this is you're not supposed to pick the ball up when you move it. You're supposed to slide it because if you pick the ball up, that looks like a snap. And so if you pick the ball up to move it, that's a situation when the referee can step in and say, "Hey, reset the snap." But if you're doing that, then they didn't reset the play clock, and so like the guard wasn't totally set. And then I think he had Logan Lee and Y.A. Black, which is like 700 pounds of dude, on each shoulder, and his chest got high because he wasn't set. Like all of those things happened, and the operations was a bit slow based on, I would imagine that's also because Contreras saw the ball getting re-snapped and he wasn't totally ready for it. So if you wait an extra half a tenth, 5/100ths of a second, Lee doesn't, or whatever. Logan Lee might have been the guy that got a hand on it. Lee doesn't get a finger on it because the ball is off just far enough and just above the outstretched finger. So like, other than that, we talked about it on Kicking It, which is going to come out after this show. But Iowa State won hidden yards. And despite even if you include the pick six, Iowa State won hidden yards. The average starting field position, if you take away the very last, so if you take away 2 drives from Iowa, because it was the last drive that they just knelt it out, which doesn't really count as an offensive drive. And if you take away the pick six, Iowa's average starting field position on offensive possessions was their own 19, which that's inside a touchback. Like that's inside a punt touchback, not even a kickoff touchback. So that was, special teams was really good. I also, the one other thing, and we talked about this again in a good amount in kicking, so I'll stop in special teams after this because we can get to offensive and defensive stuff. But the Jalen Knoll had a really bad sequence of 3 plays, but overall, I don't think he played
one of those, the kick return. That was the only other special teams thing I wanted to hit on.
There was the special
the
teams,
bouncing one.
Yeah, and we talk about that a bunch. But the one where it was a punt and he didn't field it and it cost like an extra 10 or 15 yards, we go into plenty of that. But the thing is you automatically get the ball back on a punt, no matter what. If you just don't touch it. If they punt it out of the end zone, if they punt it wherever, they kick it to a fan, you get the ball back. Punt is volunteering the possession away. So if you don't feel 100% confident that you're going to field the ball, don't touch it. If you're not 100%, don't touch it. Because the only way that goes poorly is if you touch it and give the ball back. That's the only way. So that was a shank by Torrey Taylor, and Knoll got sort of a candy hop, might have been able to field it, but it was bouncing weird. And he didn't feel like, because by that point, he'd been catch tackled by Cooper DeJean. He'd been catch, run away, and then tackled also, I'm pretty sure, by Cooper DeJean. So you're expecting, even if the punt's not right, you're expecting the coverage team to be there because you're either looking at the ball or you're looking at the coverage. You can't be looking at both. So like, if he's looking at the ball, he doesn't know where the coverage is. If I don't feel super confident and I bobble this, then I give the ball to Iowa in plus territory, and our defense is allowed like 90 yards in the entire second half, or they allowed 90 yards in the second half. So like, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't love it. If you get a candy hop, field it, but I don't mind letting that one go. The one in the end zone, that'll be fixed. Like, that'll get fixed, move on from that one, just because it's a very easy mental change to get rid of that.
Yeah, that was quite the deal. It's like a pitching wedge, just spun right back.
Yeah, that's one where the change is you just tell your returner, the deep returner, the guy, whether it's because they usually put one on the goal line and one on the 5. Tell your deep returner your heels are on the 0 yard line. If it's going over your head, don't field it. If it's going to you or in front of you, go field it. That's it. Don't play at the 3 and trust that it's going to go over your head. So like, that's an easy fix.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think our punter, we got a hit on.
Yeah, I was just about to.
Perkins.
He can
punted Torrey Taylor.
He can.
That's 2 in a row. This is a year-long battle, and Tyler's up by 2 games. We'll see who wins, gets the playoff race.
It just amazes me how far he can kick the ball.
And it's into and with the wind, which is like different techniques that you have to use. You're trying to keep the nose up when you're with the wind because it rides the wind further. You're trying to keep the nose down into the wind so you can kind of like penetrate. It's sort of like in golf, like a low ball flight where you don't want to hang it up super high and have it come down an elevator shaft versus with the wind, you do want to hang it up a little bit. And both, there wasn't much wind on Saturday, but there was some, though. There was some, and it was into the wind going to the south end zone and with the wind going to the north end zone and just bombed the shit out of both directions. So the only thing that I think he's got to continue to work on is like, bud, you got a huge leg. If you're punting from anywhere from like, if you're standing on the -40 on in, shoot it at one of the goalposts or at one of the pylons. Don't kick it straight down the middle field.
I'm so glad you brought this up, though.
I think he landed one 8 yards deep, which is just angling.
So who I was sitting next to in the press box, I won't say their name, but they were pissed that he touchbacked his first punt. It was a yard into the end zone. That thing went straight up and 1 yard back. It could not have, it was 1 yard off from being the best punt of the season.
Yeah, and it happens sometimes where like you try and gauge it a little bit, but the coaching on those is if you aim for the back pylon, depending on which direction you're going, if you aim for the back pylon, right-footed punters, the ball will curve if you are the punter from the right to the left, so it's
Right.
going to play a little draw. If you're punting towards the left pylon, you want to aim to the back pylon because it'll draw out of bounds at the front pylon. If you're punting to the right side, it's going to draw back, so you want to punt to the front pylon, and then that'll draw towards it. So like either way, like field position was not a problem. It was offensive execution here and there that was a problem.
Can I ask you real quick where we attribute his growth from year 1 to year 2? Do you think that's just natural development, or do you think that strength coach has something to do with that? Because I feel like he's added 10 yards on every kick.
I would say even more than that.
It's
Okay, I was conservative with
Yeah.
that.
strength coach, confidence and technique.
It's a lot of things.
Emotional-
what
you're
you're
Pretty
trying-
maturity.
extremely highly recruited out of
Yeah, he's
high
a
school.
heck of a
Yeah.
punter.
So I think it's just definitely like the confidence and just the reps. I mean, when you're in high school, you playing other sports or you've got other stuff going on. So, and when you're in college, every single day you're working on your craft, whether that's getting stronger, faster, knowing what you're doing better. And I think that's just, I'm sure he's getting stronger, so he's able to kick the ball harder. But it's just the reps. Hey, if I do it this in this situation, like, hey, it's gonna be perfect. And I think he kind of hammered home on that clearly this offseason.
All right, Jeff. I do have a couple random things. Is that okay?
Well,
There's
we
still
still have
game
to play
related.
Ohio. Like,
Yeah, no. One of them is Ohio. The
Okay.
other one is music related. Which one do you want?
let's do Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Let's do Ohio.
So this quarterback is back and good again, apparently.
Okay.
So I'm in this Bet Rivers betting contest. Went 0-5 in picks this week. It's the worst week of my life.
Nice.
Ultra competitive, and I got blown out by the Iowa fan who's playing me. One of my picks was Florida Atlantic over Ohio because of how bad Ohio looked. Obviously, the quarterback made much of a difference because they ended up outright winning, and I had FAU to win by 6. So what do you think about the Bobcats?
So I think we actually are joined by Bo Blankenship, who was at Iowa State, then transferred to Ohio, and he played the current head coach was his running backs coach, so he's like fairly familiar. So if you want some Bobcat information, tune into Kicking It, which is going to come out tomorrow. Okay, so it's going to come out tomorrow. But what do I think about the Bobcats? I think when you play lower level, air quotes, lower level, so MAC school versus Big 12, the skill positions are going to be just the same. Like you're going to have quality skill positions all the way around because you can find athletes everywhere and they grow and develop and they're fast and whatever. Where you have a disadvantage is they don't make lots of Dominic Oranges or Tyler Unyetums across the country. And most of those guys consolidate around the bigger programs. So where the advantage for Iowa State is going to be is size and physicality of both lines, and for Iowa State defensively, the secondary. Ohio won't see a better secondary all year. So they're defensively, Ohio played Iowa State last year. Iowa State comfortably won that game, and it was the same quarterback. So there is a talented quarterback. They were able to put pressure on him, get him to be uncomfortable because the defensive line was good with Will McDonald and those guys. Well, I think the defensive line on average across the board is better this year than it was last year, even though there is no Will McDonald. So I think defensively, I feel very confident that they're going to play well. And I feel like because you had a lesson in necessary physicality and necessary details against Iowa, you bring that to the game next week because the tight ends, the offensive line, every once in a while would whiff, or every once in a while wouldn't bring their pad level where they needed to, or every once in a while wouldn't bring enough juice to the party and they get blown backwards. Well, now you have that lesson of this is what it takes to be good, and you're going against a team that doesn't have the talent that Iowa does. So I feel confident that they're going to be able to do it, but there's still talent on Ohio's side. I think that 2.5 or 3.5 line is a little deflated just because of Iowa State having 45 snaps in the first game and playing Iowa in the second game. The offense is statistically, by power rankings and stuff, going to look worse than they really are. And I think defensively, and offensively, Ohio is inflated because they played San Diego State and FAU. They haven't played Iowa State.
Yeah, they're not going to see a defense like Iowa State's all year.
For sure. And I think that's where Iowa State got into them last year. They kind of played a game like you see in the Cy-Hawk game where the defense is waiting for the offense to make a mistake. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, it might have been for the tie, but I'm pretty sure Ohio had a drive deep into Iowa State territory where they either would have tied the game with a touchdown or taken the lead. And Iowa State came up with a massive interception. And that was where the tides kind of changed. Then there was a special teams issue for Ohio, and something else happened where it was like, okay, they're taking themselves out of this game. I think Rourke got sacked a couple of times when he could have thrown the ball away.
But that's what, I mean, Haycock, we talk about Phil Parker's defense with Iowa doing the, hey, I don't think you can do this. That's what Haycock, especially this year, they're forcing the issue more because the secondary is so good. You can roll the dice a little bit more. But in the past years, that's the whole rush 3, drop 8 is like, I don't think you're going to be patient enough to throw a 5-yard pass 35 times. So you're going to throw it, it's going to be a sack, or it's an incompletion, or you're going to throw an interception, or you're going to scramble when you don't need to. You're going to start seeing ghosts. So that happened last year, but now this year it's a little bit more aggressive. But yeah, I don't think any college team can drive 15 plays 5 times in a game. No. It's big plays and mistakes, which are what generally beat you. And if you just don't give those up.
With these new clock rules, you do 4 drives with 15 plays, the game might be over.
The third quarter for the Iowa State game, I mean.
Is what, 2 drives?
Not even. Iowa finished their drive in the fourth quarter, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to double check, but yeah, I hate it, by the way. It is the worst. It feels like it's not a football game. It's a sprint to the finish.
So many TV timeouts, too.
Yeah, my buddy, you know the guy on the field with the sign? That's my buddy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
What a job, right?
He's got a terrible job. Everybody dislikes him.
He said the Iowa offensive line was getting into him a lot. There's a territorial war going on between snaps, and it was my scrawny ginger friend and the Iowa offensive line.
I think one thing, too, just touching on the quarterback for Ohio, playing in the Big 12 and playing the preseason we have, we've seen a couple talented quarterbacks already this season. Obviously, the Iowa State practice goes against Rocco and the slew of quarterbacks every day at practice as well. Quarterback is a huge position, and this guy's extremely talented, but I think there's going to be...
the number 1 prospect in the 2024 CFL draft. It's per their game notes right here.
Really?
Yeah. I've never seen that before. I didn't know they come up with pre-draft prospects for the Canadian League.
That's good knowledge.
Yeah.
Good for him?
Yeah.
I think so. It can't be bad, right?
I mean, it's sort of like you're the tallest second grader.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to set it up like if I were to make an IFL mock draft list.
Sure.
We'd take that level, and that would really... Then we'll make... Curtis here.
Anyway,
a little better about
Colin, you were saying something.
Yeah, no. back to what I was saying here, I guess. We see good quarterbacks every day. Good quarterback play with the secondary is something that they're used to seeing, and certainly something you have to respect. But I certainly see our defense still being able to go out there and control the pace of this game, just based off of what they're able to do with the secondary and seeing some of those guys get after the quarterback here again. I think we'll be able to see some good production.
Well, and the other thing that is in Iowa State's favor in this game is that Matt Campbell's played 3 MAC teams. Average score of that game's been 37-13, and I think the reason for that is not because Iowa State is substantially better than the MAC teams. I feel like they are talent-wise. It's, the recruiting rankings and whatever for what it's worth. But it's the fact that he played in the MAC. So he knows what those teams are going to coach in the MAC for forever. Yeah. So he knows what those teams are going to bring to the party. He knows how they're going to be attacking this game and knows to not let... He doesn't take any of these MAC games for granted because he understands what the other side feels about this. Yep. So despite you coming off the Iowa game, emotional quote letdown, this is not going to be an emotional letdown. This is not going to be let's just, because as coaches every once in a while are going to go through the motions and just say, they say we got to treat every team with respect. They're humans too. Like it happens where they come out with slight lack of intensity or focus or whatever. This is not going to be one of those weeks because Campbell played or coached in the MAC for so long and understands what this means to them. Understanding how much you have to bring to the party to match that intensity. I don't feel like this is going to be a letdown week. I don't feel like this is going to be you show up and expect to win and not have to try.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of young guys too. This is huge opportunities for them to go out there and get reps. It's another opportunity for them to go out there and get a little bit more confident before we get into Big 12 play. And you can't look over this game, and it's another opportunity to get better.
Yeah, and I think the big part is there's not many Group of 5 teams that are hosting Power 5 teams, and I hate using that distinction. It's all the same league. I think if you go undefeated, no matter what school you're at the top 130 there in the FBS, you should be in the playoff no matter what. But rarely is a MAC school going to host a Big 12 team, and that's their stadium is going to be will be the biggest crowd they've had. I don't know what their average crowds are like. Didn't bring my magazine today, but this is going to be their quote unquote Super Bowl, to really put it precisely, especially with being 2-1 already, and they want to prove that they're decent enough. Especially if you win the MAC, you want a better bowl game. This is huge for Ohio.
I've heard a fair amount of Cyclone fans traveling out to this game as well.
It's a long drive. I think it's 9 hours.
Really?
Yeah,
For driving, that's not too bad. 9 hours?
Oh, I've done
terrible.
15.
You're doing a day.
It's not very fun, but yeah.
Drove
I
up-
just figure it like sounds closer than it is.
Yeah.
Ohio always does, because there's a dirt track out there I go to once or twice a year, and it's flat now, and you're just like, man, the last 2 hours just drag.
Indiana's a long state, or a wide state. No, I think I'm interested. I'm interested to see how the offense gets to play in a situation where they've had a couple snaps now. We know that Rocco's the guy. We know that Norton and Sama are the guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know who your five are probably going to be on the offensive line. You've played enough, and now you're not playing a team that has YA Black on the defensive line, or you're not playing against Cooper DeJean, or you're not playing against guys that are going to be, I think both those two guys, I think Cooper DeJean's probably going to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL draft this year, and YA Black is probably going to be a top 3-round draft pick whenever he's eligible. Like, the Iowa's defense is really good. And you and I, first game out, no idea what you're going to expect. A lot of young guys, knew everything. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like, because this, I feel like, will be a truer picture, although not the truest picture, because you still need a little bit of time. It'll be a truer picture of what this offense is going to be by the end of the year, because of the circumstances they've had in the first couple weeks. So I'm excited to see the offense not as tight as they were. And also, one thing, just speaking of offense, one statistic that people are going to probably have, like the well actuallys on the internet, I believe Ohio allowed 5 rushing yards against FAU, which just, quote, doesn't bode well against Iowa State. But FAU only attempted 11 rushes. So it's not really that big of a deal. Now, it's half yard per carry. Oh, cool. But it's 11 rushes on everything else. It's the offensive system is not set up to do that.
Yeah.
So it's not quite really apples to apples. Defense is good, yes. But again, they haven't played this level of physicality and size as what they're going to bring in. But I do expect good execution, a lot of fight, a lot of discipline. It's just Iowa State, I think, is going to be more powerful and more consistent over time.
Absolutely. And I wrote about on Saturday just Rocco and keeping him in that game after throwing that interception, how much that helps his foundation and trust in Coach Campbell. And that's going to be huge this week, especially, I said that was the only Power 5 defense he's faced. Well, now you're back to a MAC defense that you're facing off with here. How many times is he going to go for a big play, go for, take a shot, take a chance, and plays like that? And how many carries are we going to see out of those 3 running backs that aren't Abu Sama and Cartavius Norton? That's really what I'm looking for on Saturday. How about you, like with the offensive line? What do you want to see out of them, and where's your top 5 going at this point in the year?
I think that offensive line has showed that they can do some things. I think that they've shown that they come out and they can move people. I think this is a great week just to get back on track and fix and flush. I think that's one of the biggest things that you have to do. It's a long football season. It's one football game, and we still have the Big 12 ahead of us. But we have this game right now, and what better way to get a little bit of confidence going into Big 12 play than coming out and dominating? Being able to say, hey, we're going to take control of this game, and we're going to put it on our backs. We're going to be able to run the ball, and we're going to continue to keep Rocco clean. It's such a momentum game, football and any sport really is, hey, can you get a little bit of confidence and a little bit of momentum going? Nothing can stop you if you start to get a little bit of confidence and momentum going. So I think that they'll be able to continue to keep the quarterback clean, and I think they'll just be able to take another step forward of, hey, we're this unit, and we gotta continue to grow and get some dudes moved.
Yeah, and we'll see how they come out on Saturday. I'm about to go up to Ames, talk to Matt Campbell, see what's up with Gary Vaughn. That's kind of the biggest storyline going into today. I don't think I'm going to ask him about George Strait playing at Jack Trice, though he might have a good answer.
I feel like he might be a George Strait guy. Like he's a 80s metal guy, but it feels like he could be a George Strait guy. You saying thing about Rocco and kind of the faith of leaving him in. I would like to say this, and I'm going to address there's a small contingent of every fan base who is a bench the quarterback, fire the coach guy. You're wrong. That's it. Okay. Now here's why.
We're not contesting you on that. We're
Here's
behind
why.
you.
If there is the bench the quarterback, fire the coach guy, one, it is much easier to
Bench the quarterback than it is to fire the coach.
yes, but at the same time, it is with a quarterback. One of the things that has to happen is you have to be free enough and confident enough to be in an offense because you have to process a ton. And if you are doing what you think you should do, then like the pick six that Rocco threw, on paper, the right throw. Because it's cover 4. They're in cover 4. The corner's going to get out of there. Both safeties are going to get out of there. And the linebacker, who is inside, is going to be the one that has to cover the flat. So on paper, you draw it on paper, that out route should be open. I trust that my running back is going to get more width than the linebacker. I'm going to be able to make that throw. On paper, that's what I should do. In reality, it's not. Now, why, if you are in the bench the quarterback, fire the coach guy, what mindset do you think that puts the quarterback in if every time something bad happens, you yank him for somebody else? Then he has to start thinking, uh-oh, if I make the wrong read, if I make the wrong play, I'm going to get pulled. And so you start going to that on paper, this looks like it should be there because you don't have enough confidence to feel the game out. You feel like the pressure of, I must do this perfectly. What does the coach want to see from me? What is this play? What's the intention of this play? And then you start throwing those passes that don't actually make sense in reality, but they make sense on paper because you're trying to do what you think the coach might want. So when a quarterback is playing poorly, don't pull him. Because that the instilling of confidence that I want you to be able to take chances, because technically speaking, that pass should have not gone there. It should, by read, that's the right throw. By execution, it's not. So I got to trust you to feel this game out to know that you're not going to get pulled every time you take a chance to do something that might work on the field but doesn't work on paper. So bench the quarterback guy. All right, every time that you make one mistake in your job, you get fired. One. Every single time, no matter what it is. Hey, maybe not even fired. There's somebody walking around behind you with a small baseball bat that you get from like the iCubs little store. And every time you make a mistake, that person just smacks you in the back of the head with it. Every single time. What are you going to play? Being the guy who hits him is going to be kind of fun. But what do you think your perception, if knowing that you're going to get hit in the back of the head every single time you make a mistake, are you going to take any chances? Ever? Are you going to try and do something? Are you going to try and be competitive, or are you going to try and just minimize the screw ups?
Yep.
That's what happens. So bench the quarterback, fire the coach guy. You're wrong. Point blank, plain and simple. If there's a time when the quarterback has been bad for several weeks in a row, sure. At that point, it might make sense because the rest of the team needs the confidence that instilling a new position is going to be in. But if a quarterback has been bad for a drive or two, or even a game, you cannot pull him because confidence is a huge thing. So I'm talking to you again. Bench the quarterback, fire the coach guy. You're wrong. Get off the internet. Go take a walk. Breathe for a little bit. Look in the mirror and say, you're better than this.
I would urge people to look at their laptops and watch the 2011 UConn game.
The Steel Chance.
The 3 interceptions.
3 interceptions on 4 passes. Comes back to win the game. It's just confidence to be free enough that you're going to go, I can go out and take some chances. I can make the play that I think I need to make.
Did Josh Lenz throw one of those passes?
The interceptions? No, it was Steelhead.
No, not one of the interceptions.
Oh, the touchdowns? I think he threw one to Ernst.
Was it Ernst or Darius?
I don't remember.
I know Darius jumped over a guy that
was
broke
cool.
his ankles. Yeah,
that was cool. That was cool. But yeah, that's just one thing, is that like you lose one game, the world's not on fire, the sky is not falling, Chicken Little, recede yourself, because when actual fury needs to happen, we'll tap you in. But this is not an actual fury moment. It's a new coaching staff with new running backs, with new quarterbacks, with a new offensive line coach, with a new set of tight ends, with a new set of wide receivers. They are playing the best defense and one of the best defenses in America. It's not great, but
growing.
RELAX. Relax.
I like it. One more thing, Colin. Jeff doesn't want to do the music question. I'll do it to you. So you would
I'm
know
not
better.
a big music guy.
When you were playing,
Yeah.
usually the stadium would play Juicy Wiggle in the fourth quarter after Iowa State has imposed their will to the point where this game is over. We're playing Juicy Wiggle.
Yep.
On Saturday, they played it in a Hilton Magic type of feel, rally back with Juicy Wiggle. Do you support that or are you against it? I've been getting mixed reviews. I've been all over the Cyclone Fanatic forums. There's a 27-page thread on it.
I to that stuff, honestly, I'm more of the football guy. That stuff is whatever.
I was hoping I'd get a fun answer out of either of you
but
guys. It's okay.
If it fires
Semantically,
people
it is.
up, I guess.
Semantically, it is whatever. What can it hurt?
Yeah.
Right? Like you were either gonna play it or just not play it, and you know, have everyone sit
people
there.
get
Be
excited,
out.
I guess.
Yeah.
But there were definitely people around me that are like, "Why are we doing this right now?" I was probably a little bit more like, "What are we doing right now? Like, let's go win this football game, and then we can celebrate with Juicy Wiggle." But
I do like that.
I guess that'd be my take.
Jeff,
I don't care.
I had to throw a random thing.
I don't care.
We didn't get enough.
I don't know. I think one of the things that I wish that I hope, or not wish, in the operations group, can we update the stadium music a little? Like bring in a little bit newer songs, not necessarily getting some like The Clash, like just something that's just a little bit newer to get the guys on the field some energy, because if they play with energy, the crowd gets energy.
We've gone away from swag surf, and I think that needs
To come back.
Yeah.
That Archie
That was
Eversole,
cool.
like the stuff that like gets 18 to 22-year-old kids excited.
And those songs
energy.
aren't even new.
No,
you
but
know.
I don't know. I'm very I don't care as much, but stadium environment wise, I'm very pro play what would get the players going, and by doing that, you get the fans going. That's my take. But I'm also not dealing with licensing or censoring and music cutting and whatever. It's not my job, so I don't know. Jack Trice, Hilton, both terrific places to play a football game.
Basketball.
You think Hilton too?
Well,
Football game there?
Great place to play a football game.
We're getting a arena
Little
football
tight.
field in there. I know.
Little tight.
I know a guy.
Little tight, but anyway, no, it's fine to get people excited. Cool, whatever.
Yeah.
You guys
Same thing.
made a mockery of my
No,
care, my care about the game day experience.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Hopefully parking's better next home game. But next episode, we'll be back with plenty of more random things, I'm sure, coming off Ohio and going into the OSU game. I'm really excited to break that one down and see what kind of quarterbacks we get out of them. But can't look ahead. 2.5-point favorite, I think, Saturday at Ohio. 11 a.m. ESPNU. And once again, we were presented by Wiffles Hybrid today. So thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys. See you next week.
Go Clones.